Hey, Alec Miller here, founder of Royals and Rogues, and today I want to talk about making better particles. Now, I don't want to mislead you. This is not going to be a tutorial. This is going to be a technique, which means that this is going to work no matter what program you like to use. So whether you're using Xparticles, Particular, Houdini, Unreal Engine, Blender, this is going to work in all of those, which does mean, though, I'm not going to teach you how to get started in whatever program that is. There are a million and one tutorials, I guarantee, that will tell you how to start generating particles. This is supposed to give you the techniques you need to actually make those particles look good. I'm really tired of seeing these magic glowy balls everywhere. I don't really know what they're supposed to be. Are these supposed to be sparks? Are they supposed to be, fire? Is it magic? I really don't know, and they really don't look good. And our human eye doesn't recognize them as real particles. So what I'm going to try to do is teach you how to make particles that look like this, or like this, or like that. Things that you find in Ghost of Tsushima or in your favorite victory screens. These are going to be particles that you can be proud of. Now, I've had many, many years of making particles. I've been making particles for my entire career, and I've gone from making the classic glowy balls that I critique to making pretty decent particles, I think, that actually look somewhat realistic, or at least realistic isn't really the goal here. But the goal is to make them look eye-catching and engaging. You can also use this technique to make realistic particles, but really the goal is just to make them look better. So save this video and find another tutorial that's going to teach you the specifics, and then come back as soon as you get done with that tutorial and watch this one. So as I make more and more tutorials and content for you guys, you're going to hear me saying this a lot. You're also going to hear it coming up in our interviews. You're going to hear this whenever I talk to another artist, you're going to hear this point over and over again. But if you want your work to improve, the number one thing you should do is copy real life. You want to copy real life. You want to find examples of whatever you're trying to make in real life and use that as a reference. And the reason why is because as humans, that's what we have the most experience with. That's how we know if something even is an ember or a spark or is not, is we measure it against real life. And so if you can master creating the real version of something, a realistic version, or at least the attributes that a real life spark has, then when you make your own sparks and embers and particles, you can draw on that and show that that looks like what you're trying to create. And then what you want to do is remix and exaggerate. So you're going to take something like a real life spark, which is a little ember, and then really crank the glow on it, right? Really make it vibrant so that really is eye-catching. Because in real life, it might not be that eye-catching, right? We're taking the ideal and then really cranking it. Same thing for anything else. If you're trying to make a cloudy sky or something, the best thing to do is reference real life skies, recreate that, and then you can really crank that to be the ideal version that's rarely seen. This is what artists do all the time, and that's how you get these different builds. So the same thing when you're making your particles. So you're going to want to study, what do real life particles do? Now, I'm going to save you some steps. You're not going to have to sit here and just watch videos of particles for hours. So instead, I'm going to give you some do's and don'ts that'll get you there much, much faster. So learning from nature, do and don't number one. Do not use opacity. Nothing in real life goes from visible to gradually invisible. That's not really how it works. Things that you think do this are actually usually changing in either brightness, so they're going from bright to dark, or they're changing in size. They're going from larger to smaller. And if you think about this, it makes a lot of sense. If you have let's say a burning ember, a spark coming off of a fire, well, what that is, it's a little piece of fuel. It's a little piece of wood that is coming off of from the larger chunk of wood and then drifting away in the air. And as it drifts, it's going to get burnt up and it's going to shrink and it's going to disappear. Or let's say you had some burning papers. It's a piece of paper that's dislodged from the rest of the paper and is now burning away from the outside in. And what that's going to do is change in scale, not changing in opacity or visibility. So leave your, transparency, opacity, visibility sliders alone. Never touch them. It's number one sign for me of an amateur effects artist is if things are fading off. Nothing actually fades off in real life. Your fire is dying down. It's not going from visible to invisible. Snowflakes even, something you think, well, they melt, right? It's like, yeah, they're melting again from the outside in, right? There's a cold core. That's the last thing to melt while everything else melts from the outside in. So that's number one step, is stop using opacity, start using scale and intensity, like brightness. Number two is stop using preset shapes, especially spheres. Nature abhors, it hates a perfect circle. There's no perfect circles in nature. Now, you might think something's a perfect circle because you're zoomed far enough out, like the globe or a ball of some sort, but when you zoom in, you realize it's really, really bumpy. And the number one way to make something feel more organic versus feeling artificial is by adding imperfections. So what you're gonna wanna do, and this goes for anything, is think about the shape of what you're trying to make and then create some versions of it, right? Create 5 or 6 different shapes that you've made yourself. It's gonna be really easy for anyone to detect, and it's not gonna feel natural if you're using preset shapes. So instead, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go and make a mask if you're in a 2D program like After Effects, and load in that mask. You can go to Photoshop and make custom shapes there. Make 10, make 20, make 30. Save them out as PNGs, save them out as TIFFs. They can be really small. They can be like, 100 pixels by 100 pixels or 200 by 200. And then use those as your source material. Make it random when they show up. This will add a ton of diversity and make your particles look like nobody else's because you've literally hand designed them. Now, you don't need to make 100 unique particles. You could make 5 or 6 or 8, and then from there, randomly seed them with varying amounts. And it's gonna feel pretty much good after you get past, I usually find 4 is actually enough. You get past 4 or 5 and people can't really count. You'll recognize this if you ever bought chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets are actually predefined shapes. There's a boot, there's a nugget, there's a whatever, and there's a few of these shapes that seem somewhat random, but they're actually cookie cutter shapes. But there's just enough of them that they don't feel redundant. You always feel like you're getting a new shape whenever you get a box of chicken nuggets, even though they are all the same few shapes. The same thing applies to your particles. Make a few custom shapes, a few custom snowflakes as it were, and then seed them into your sim rather than using the default shapes or 1 or 2 custom shapes. Make a few and then use those over and over again. If you're in a 3D program, you can literally make a few polygons. These can be pretty lightweight and then import those. Or if you're layering a texture over your particles, which I would recommend, same thing, just use your custom sprites. Custom sprites are amazing. Use them all the time. You will thank me later. The next do not have one sim trying to run everything. Trying to run all of your particles in one simulation is a mistake. I used to make this mistake all the time, where I'd create a sim and I'd want a bunch of variation. I'd want, some embers, and I want some thicker ones, and I want some small ones, and I want some really close to the camera. I'd want some really far away from the camera. And I tried to get one simulation that was giant to run all these the way I wanted, with all the variation, with some that are really spinny and some that are more flowy. And it's not a good idea. What you're gonna end up doing is breaking one thing anytime you try to make it do something else. Instead, make 3 or 4 sims that are more lightweight. Have the one in the background be super low resolution if it's going to be blurred out. No need to have all the detail and all the custom shapes in that one. Find control over your bokeh and how blurred they are that way. And then make some that are closer to the camera, that are really, really high resolution and might be a little higher, polygon count or pixel density. But you can take those ones and really have very few of them. Just have a couple that show up, right? You can also add, if you're using motion blur, you can add a ton of interpolation to those ones, right? So those could have really, really smooth trails, and they're not gonna be any jaggedy, jags in them, no breaks within the body of your particle. But you don't have to render all of your particles at that same resolution, just the ones you're actually gonna see up close. And then make a third render in the middle, right? That's your dense, pretty much your biggest sim is gonna be the big body of the particles that are coming off of whatever it is. And then with that sim, add a second duplicate of it, which is more turbulent, and one that is less turbulent. And that gives you a ton of variation, which again, allows you to get closer to nature. Nature very, very rarely follows the same path over and over again, is squared edges and perfect circles. If you do that, it actually makes it feel false. It makes it feel robotic. It's very similar to the problem we had in 3D for the longest time. All the textures would feel the same because they were all perfectly smooth and didn't have any imperfections. Or if they did have imperfections, it'd be spread out way too evenly. It should be kind of random. There should be some smudges here and there. There should be some, corners that are chipped off and others that are more rounded depending on what's happened to whatever object it is. And the same thing with particles, and the same thing with effects, is by layering these different effects on, by doing multiple sims, not just one giant sim. What you can do is create these subtle nuances between each of your different types of particles going on. And what that allows for is more natural feeling simulations. It doesn't feel as artificial as everything going one direction with the exact same turbulence applied. Add variations. And then you can go extremes with them, right? You can add extremely high stuff, you can add extremely low stuff. A couple more tips and tricks that I'm not going to get as much detail in is change the color over the life. Again, if you're looking at something like an ember, what you're not going to want to do is just have it be solid yellow the whole time, right? It should go from being bright yellow to, a little more orange and darker red to completely burnt out, right? And then you can add in within this is the brightness changes shouldn't also just be static. They shouldn't be linear from on slowly to off, from 100 to 0. You can have it ramp a little bit, and then you can have it spike a couple times as it finds new little pieces of fuel and oxygen to burn up and get brighter and then darker and brighter and then darker again before it finally flitters out. So there it is. That's my advice for how to make better, more realistic, more engaging, interesting particle simulations in whatever program you choose to use. If this helped you out, please hit like and hit subscribe. We're going to have a ton more content coming, as well as some really, really awesome renders and short films and just all the works. It's going to be really, really fun. If there's a new podcast guest or any other suggestions you have for the channel, I would love to hear it. In the comments below, let me know what program you're actually making your particles in, and I can probably give you more specific advice if you have any questions about how to get something set up, how to link something properly, how to use a custom material, or anything like that. I'm Alec Miller, founder of Rosen Rogues, and I'll see you in the next one.